Hi, I'm Dr. Elizabeth Coyne, and with me today I've got Eileen. Now Eileen, can you introduce yourself and what you actually are doing now?
So I have been working with Griffith University. I work as a lecturer, academic, as a clinical facilitator. My background is in oncology nursing, where I specialised as an internationally certified oncology nurse for about 25 years. And currently I'm just registering as a holistic counsellor.
So that's why I have asked Eileen to sort of go through what is some ideas about self-care and, sort of being aware of how you may feel, that feeling of being overwhelmed, and what you can do about it. And so I think one of the main things to identify is that being a carer is a task that you cannot just suddenly move out of, and that carer exhaustion is real. And so what are some points about sort of how you might recognise how you're feeling?
Thanks, Elizabeth. I think when a patient is diagnosed with cancer, particularly something like brain cancer, there is a lot of focus on the patient, and there is an automatic assumption that family or will step in that carer role, but there's little preparation to be a carer. What does that mean and how do you cope? And so many times people keep putting on a brave front and they feel they can't they can't let their distress show because they've got to be strong for the patient. And that can be whether the patient is a child or an adult, and they can't let that care exhaustion show. And sometimes they don't even admit it to themselves because there's this expectation that I'm just the carer, it's the patient that's got the disease.
Yeah.
So feeling guilty about even feeling exhausted, feeling guilty about asking for some time off. So we need to recognise that there is a lot of distress, particularly in families where there is a close relationship. That may be your partner, your child, your parent who is the patient. There's a lot of relationship and there's a lot of tangled emotions that revolve around that role. Within families, every person will respond to one of their family members being diagnosed with cancer in a different way. And that comes from their own place and space of where they are in their life. One of the key things, I guess, is as health professionals is to allow the space for carers to be able to recognise that, to acknowledge that their concerns are real and are worthy of time and space. They need to space themselves out to manage to make sure that they have, much the same way as health professionals do, we have to continue to nurture ourselves so that we can continue to give. Otherwise we're going to run out. So it's particularly important to know that carer exhaustion is very real. It comes along the same sort of lines as compassion fatigue. To recognise it, to give voice to it, to give yourself permission to be human. Very important. And to be able to recognise what it is, step in and have little strategies that can be useful. It may be that you go for a walk, it may be that you talk to a friend outside of the family. Finding strategies that you find nurture yourself and recognise that in investing in yourself, you're actually providing yourself in a much more stable and better way to be able to fulfil the carer role.
One of the things that research actually highlights is that the carer's stress is often higher than the patient, and they also their information needs, because often as a carer, you're not included in those close conversations all the time. And so it's not that the doctor and the health professionals are excluding you, but sometimes when the patient is getting information, you're just not there, or you're not able to be there, you're caring for the children at work. And so often your information needs are actually higher. And so it's important to acknowledge that. And also it's sometimes good to give it a rating. And we've talked about journaling. And this is important to actually sort of identify where you are on sort of scale out of 1 to 10 of, how do I feel this week? How did I feel last week? Has it changed? Have I been able to get help? And so I think it's okay that, to recognise that it's okay to feel overwhelmed.
Yeah, and oftentimes carers feel guilty that they feel distressed.
Yeah.
And then that just creates a whole whirlpool.
Guilty about that.
Yeah, and guilty about that. Instead
Yeah.
of just acknowledging that I'm human, you know what, I'm struggling with this at the moment. So I think it's really important to have like a trusted friend or someone who's outside of that family unit that you can just talk to and say, well, this is what I'm feeling today, and these are some things that I can do to actually, nurture myself. And I don't have to feel guilty about it because I'm a human being.
Yeah.
I often think that it's the greatest act of love, that we nurture ourselves and fulfill ourselves before we undertake our carer role, be it a parent or a carer for an ill person, because we're then ensuring that we are full, we're whole, and so then we can bring the whole self. In nursing, we talk about that therapeutic use of self. Well, if the self is depleted, then we have little to offer. In fact, we're offering a defective instrument. So to nurture the self is the first step in any carer role, I think.
And there's some different ways to actually sort of look at that to protect your family. And one of them is actually sort of, because information needs and that struggle with information is often quite stressful, that it's sometimes a good idea to have either a place or a person that does that. And so, we've talked to different people, and so having a place for updates about treatment, blog, newsletter, Facebook, having a key person that is able to be the spokesperson is sometimes a really good idea.
I think within the family that's very important, particularly if there's a large number in the family group and the patient is going in and out of hospital. It's important that the health staff have a key person to communicate with, because then that person is getting the full and accurate information that they can then disseminate to the rest of the family. Of course, in some families there is disassociation and problems where some family members don't talk. And then that can be a little bit tricky for the health professionals to negotiate, and those people then need to be honest with the health professionals, explain, okay, there's a break in our family where this side doesn't talk to that side, so there might need to be to express that they need also to have information. So that can be a little bit tricky for health professionals to negotiate, but it's important that that family actually talk to the health professionals to explain that situation, so that we can work out what is best going to suit this family and how their needs can actually be met.
And that's really important, because the more open you are with the health professionals, the more they can then help you. And see, that may be, even the discussion with the social worker, who's able to then identify different ways where information can be, presented, and different aspects.
I guess one of the key things is really encouraging people to express their needs, but take it a step back behind that, to give them permission to have needs, and that it's okay for them to in a way seek some attention in that, because they're fulfilling that carer role. And it's okay for them to have needs, and it's okay for them to express those needs.
Yeah.
So that's important, and to do that with the health professionals, where there is a safe space to be able to have that discussion, where there's no judgment placed on the family, as in seeking attention or anything like that, that open space that allows for that free-flowing communication. Then we can know the health professionals and the family have an even flow of communication, and all needs are possible then to be met. And using, as you said, social workers, psychologists, there's often psychologists, psychiatrists attached to the team, so that whole interdisciplinary team then work together cohesively with the family, so that needs can be met, whatever they are at whatever stage. And it does actually require people to put their hand up and say, actually, I'm struggling with this at the moment, and then we can put things in place for that.
Yeah. And it's okay. I think sometimes it's important to recognise that the health professionals really do want to work with you as a family. Yeah. But if you don't sort of communicate that, then they will just work with the patient.
Yes.
I think one of the last points on this slide is to think about the phone, and that it's okay not to take those phone calls,
That's
to
right.
turn it off, to allow yourself time just to sort of, chill.
I think that's very important for patients, and also for the primary carer and for other members of the family as well, to recognise that in your day there are some times when you might just need to stop and that it's okay to do that. It's okay. It might be that you get out of the house, leave the phone at home, go for a walk and just go sit in the park for a little while. But to find that little rejuvenation space, and that give yourself permission to say no. You know, actually, I don't want to go out partying with my friends. I actually just need to have some space by myself at home. And that's fine to do that.
Yep.
So, yes. So turn the phone off. Don't take those phone calls. You can put your phone on silent and even put a message to other friends and things that I'm not available between these times, etc. So don't phone me because I'm resting or I'm doing something else important. You don't even have to tell them what you're doing, but have some period of, it's like booking an appointment with yourself for some self-care.
Touching base appointment, Yeah,
a touching base. How am I going today?
Yeah.
And when we were talking about the resources and things, to recognise that there are some very good sources of information that are validated. These days, most people sort of go to the internet to try and find information. So making sure that you ask health professionals for some suggestions for appropriate resources that you can access that will give you legitimate and validated information. And there are a lot of support groups that have information for carers and information for families on them. And so often as health professionals, we will give patients a list of things like that to say you can find legitimate information in these places. And if they find other information that they have questions about, please bring that to your health professional and discuss it with them if you have concerns about the information that you've actually got before you get all anxious about what it's telling you.
Yeah, the quote from the previous slide was, "Google's not your friend."
That's exactly right.
And this is one of the interviews that I did where they had clearly sort of stated that there's some things which you just shouldn't just Google, that you need to be directed.
Yeah, to legitimate sources, exactly.
So one of the other things, we've sort of touched on this about balancing your needs, and I think it's important to prioritise what needs to be done. I think sometimes when we're in a caring role, we just want to do everything. And so what are some ideas for sort of prioritising those needs?
Well, I guess we can sort of use like a traffic light system of saying what's essential to life, what's very, very important, and what can wait. You know, is the world going to stop if certain things don't get done? You know, so we can prioritise certain things. And it may need to change the way we do things at home. You know, it may be that you don't get to hang your washing out on the line the way you like it to be hung, or you don't get to fold it off the line while it's still warm. Someone else takes it off for you and you have to fold it up later. And not, just to let go of some of those little things, because is it worth, fighting over? Is it worth having a big distress over? Is the world going to stop if that thing doesn't happen? So I think about what is absolutely essential that has to be done. People need to have their medications, they need to have their pain addressed, they need meals. So things like that are essential. Then does it matter if they have their shower in the morning or the night time? So we can let some things, or even at all, can we just do a little sponge bath? Is that essential? Making sure that we keep doctor's appointments and things like that. So what can I let go of? What is essential to life? What is very important that can impact on things? And what things can I let go of? So prioritising the patient's needs and your own needs as well. You need to eat, you need to sleep, you need to have downtime. And as you said, working with some lists can be very, very helpful. And even if you put them into those columns of what's essential and what's intermediate and what's less important, because the less important things can be kind of done any time when you can fit them in.
Or that's where you can organise your support.
Or other people can be assigned to do that, exactly. So you don't have to do everything yourself because you like things done just so. Sometimes you just got to let go of your standards a little bit.
When someone offers you a meal, then that's the time to say, that'd be great. Even if it just goes in the fridge or the freezer.
Yes, say
but
yes.
It means that, when you're having another day and things haven't gone to plan, you've got something there.
Exactly. And that's saying yes to help. Oh my gosh, it's one of the most crucial things that us as human beings need to learn to do. When someone offers assistance, be willing to say yes. It's not a failing if someone needs to help you.
Yeah, that's right.
It can actually be very good for another person to offer help because it does something positive for them as well. So be willing to accept help, but as long as it is something that is helpful to you, or be prepared to give them direction. Actually, I would prefer if you did, or could you, do a grocery run for me? Could you, I'll order it online, can you pick them up? Give them some direction about how they can help you as well, because they can't read your mind. What is going to be useful for you? And if they offer, can I help in some way? Say, yes. Can you hang out the washing? That'd be great.
Yeah.
Give someone a way that they can actually be of help to you, because then they feel useful. They're not sitting on the sidelines just watching while you run yourself ragged. And it actually does give you some reprieve, so things that are actually really useful. Remembering that there's so many different health professionals that have different roles and different resources that they can provide for you as well. So speak up. You don't have to look like you're coping when you go to the doctor. And when the doctor says, how are you? I hear so many people say, fine, thank you, doctor. And they're not. And it's like, be open, be honest. You haven't failed if the wheels have fallen off that day or the week before.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a roller coaster ride, and things change every day. And it's like, well, not so good today, things are not working out, or yesterday I had a pretty rough day. Be honest and be open about it, because the health professionals, that whole team are there to help you and or put you in touch with resources that will help you.
Yeah. And I think, one of the other things as a sort of, if you're offering help, to actually acknowledge that if they're directing you, that doesn't mean they don't want help. It may be just not be the right help. Sometimes people say, well, I'll drop round for a coffee, and then the other person might say, well, no, and don't take that as they don't want to talk to you, but more, today is not going to work, and so maybe then maybe you could drop some biscuits off, or some flowers or something, and see, sometimes with meals it's tricky as well, because people can get overwhelmed with meals, and then that becomes a burden of I have to always eat everyone else's meals, and I just feel like having a piece of toast.
I think with help it's really, really important for something to be of use. It has to be truly helpful to you.
That's right.
For you. So for the carer, if they're asking for help, be specific. If you're offering to help, if you're a friend or a neighbour or someone who is on the periphery and wanting to help, ask, what can I do? What do I need? Rather than say, I'll bring you a meal or I'll drop round for coffee. Ask, because what you're offering might not be what suits that person. But if you want to be helpful, it has to be an action that it actually really does provide assistance to that person. So, what can I do? Anything specific, and maybe make some suggestions. Would it help if I picked something up or brought you a meal? Would that be useful?
Did the watering while you're in hospital.
Watered your garden, something like that.
Walked the dog.
Organise someone to mow your lawn. Things like that, to ask. And then you will be getting direction from the person of what's truly going to be helpful for them. And as the carer and the family member, be prepared to actually give someone instruction. Say, yes, I would love someone to do X, Y, Z. So it sort of works both ways, but for something to be truly helpful, it needs to actually work for both parties.
And asking for help from the health professionals, it's not always about the actual sort of cancer trajectory. It may be about parking, where to find different bits of information, that may relate specifically to treatment, but may not relate to that. And the other thing, it's okay to ask for follow-up over the phone. That sometimes if you're looking at, a counsellor appointment that may only be short, that can they do it over the phone? Because I think we've really sort of changed the way we deliver healthcare, and it's important to actually make sure it recognises your needs as well.
I think it's important with that, Elizabeth, is a really good point you raised. So many of patients who come to metropolitan hospitals are not living in the metropolitan area. They live in rural areas, which means they have to travel. There's a cost. They have to move away from their family area. They may have to stay in the area. So information about accommodation, meal supplements, parking, as you said, follow-up. If you have to have a scan before you have your treatment, can it be organised on the same day?
The blood tests.
Just trying to coordinate things, recognising. So I had a sister in this position, and she was 3 hours away from her treatment centre, and it was a case of, can we organise that on the same day so I don't have to drive down one day and then drive back the next day? So speaking up and making sure the health professionals are aware of your situation so that they can try to coordinate things with the family.
Yep.
And recognise that it can be quite an arduous situation to travel sometimes long distances, displacement out of their support area, and they're in a foreign place. They may be unfamiliar with driving around in the city area. But when we're aware of the situation, then we can provide that information. And if it's not coming to you, then speak up and ask for it and say, yeah, you realise that I'm 4 hours away from the treatment centre, and be prepared to ask for that.
And sometimes that can be actually your nurse navigator or your your cancer care coordinator can be that person that helps allocate and helps you organise appointments that actually go together.
Absolutely.
Because it's what we do aim to do, but doesn't always work. And particularly if we're not really sort of sure that that's the way it needs
and
to
even
be
having
planned.
blood tests with your local doctor and having them sent through to the specialist, where you can go to your local community or your local little town instead of going somewhere else. Just being prepared to actually ask for that sort of help. It really helps the health professionals to provide a better service to you.
That's right. Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah. And that coordination between your Metropolitan Hospital and your GP, you really push for that because that
Very
is
much
so
key.
useful.
Absolutely.
And often doesn't occur unless the patient has really highlighted that this is their GP and this is where we need to have information.
Absolutely. And that's where the carers can sometimes speak up as that spokesperson for the patient to say, hang on a minute, I've got to do all this running around. Can we get it together a little bit more organised here?
Yeah. And the last aspect we're just going to look at, that self-care, and how do you actually find time for self-care, and how important is it, Arlene?
Caring for the carers, wow. I think the key thing in here is self, that each and every one of us is a human being with our own needs. As a carer, we are providing a service to another human being, and that service needs to be able to be provided in the fullest extent of what we would want to do. So there's so much connection between our physical well-being, our mental and our psychological well-being, that sense of self, what I'm capable of doing and what I would like to be capable of doing may be different things. So getting to know the self, accepting the self, being aware of your own limitations, and really finding different strategies that you can use to fully nurture the self so that your cup is always full, and you don't have to rely on someone else to do that, but finding ways, and it may be physical exercise, it may be spiritual practices, it may be a whole host and a whole combination of different things. And these things can be like 10 minutes a day when you get into bed at night time before you go to sleep. Can you spend 5 minutes just letting the day go and relaxing so that your sleep is sound and good quality sleep? There's lots of little strategies that are free, are simple to access, that you can carry with you. It may be music that you listen to when you have a little time-out session, but it's absolutely essential for every human being that we take time each day to nurture ourselves so that we can live fully into the next moment. Journaling, photos, things that remind you. I have a little card that I carry in my wallet that has, it's like a little poem in the form of a dedication prayer. And I pull that out to remind myself of what motivates me to do things. Journaling is excellent. There is a couple of different methods of doing it, and one I call progressive journaling, where it's particularly useful if you've had a rough day, where you just vent on the paper. It doesn't even, don't do any grammar correction, nothing. Just vent on the paper and then put it away. Come back to it about 2 days later when the emotional reactiveness has settled a little, and rewrite it, and you'll find yourself editing. And we can look at, it wasn't quite that, it was more like this. So you start to refine the emotions, what you were feeling. And do that, put it away, come back another couple of days later, and do that as many times as what you need until you get a piece of writing that you can look at and go, that truly captures what I was feeling. And it helps you develop a lot of insight into the situation. And then I have the habit of crumpling it all up then and burning it as a way of a symbolic way of letting it go. But it's a way of extracting the learning and understanding out of what was happening to
Yeah.
you at the time. And that can be very therapeutic. It's like being your own
Yeah.
counsellor, which is amazing. And even just jotting things in a journal, ad hoc. It doesn't have to be a chore that you have to write something
Yeah,
every day.
don't make it a chore.
It doesn't need to be a chore. It should be a pleasurable thing. You can sit down at the end of the day, and it might be that you just write down one thing that you're grateful for the day, or one thing that you learned in the day, something that you noticed. I noticed the lorikeets in my grevillea tree today, and they looked beautiful. You know, just little simple things to remind yourself about life generally.
Yeah.
People talk about life, you know, work-life balance, and it's not about balance really. It's about the enrichment of the whole experience. I think our whole lives it is like rolling a quiet roller coaster. Sometimes pretty wild, but sometimes quieter.
Yeah.
But we ebb and flow all the time. And in times when things are a little bit rough, we need things that we can hold on to. We need people that we can call in to provide support. We need some strategies that we can support ourselves to ride those rough times. And then when things are calmer, we can relax back a little bit. But yes, so finding what can I hang on to? Who can I hang on to? What's my go-to when things are really tough that can be there as that stopgap for me? And when we do it for ourselves, then we're not relying on another person, and then we don't let ourselves down.
Yeah, yeah. And see, the last little bit is one of the poems that I've written. And you know, you just got to find what works for you. And so hopefully this sort of was useful, and it just adds with all the other bits of information that are coming through for you.
And I guess it's just, you know, you are important, you are worthy of happiness, and to nurture yourself and care for yourself as much as you care for others.
Thank you.